After 6 weekends, Blue Beetle finally surpasses its production budget at the box office. The movie has lost tens of millions of dollars. Let's get into this here. The numbers reports the film Blue Beetle grossed 1.8 million at the domestic box office in its sixth weekend to bring its domestic box office total to 69.8 million. It's grossed another 53 million at international theaters for a global box office total of 122.9 million. The outlet reports the film has an estimated production budget of 120 million. However, production estimates for the film vary. Deadline reported back in August that the production budget was 104 million, while Variety reported it was 125 million. Regardless, the film has lost millions of dollars for DC, and is just the latest example of how big a mistake the company made when DC Studio CEO James Gunn announced he would be resetting DC with Superman Legacy back at the end of January. If you use the most charitable production budget of 104 million, the film has currently lost 82.2 million. That's if you do a 2.5 times factor, that factors in the box office split that studios take compared to theaters, as well as the marketing costs for the film. We've kind of gone over this before, but if you need a refresher, basically in domestic theaters, the studios split box office haul with the theater, and then if you look at international, I think it's a little higher. It's like 43% or something like that. But anyways, it comes out like around 50-50 box office take, but then you have to factor in marketing and all of those other costs. So eventually you can use kind of like a 2.5 times factor, factoring all of that in to basically come out to break-even point and figuring out how much the film will lose money. And then obviously if you're factoring in just specific losses for the studio, you have to factor out the theater takes, right? Because the theater revenues wouldn't be part of the studio revenue. So you have to factor that out as well. So however, the production budget is at the 120 million mark. The film has lost Warner Brothers probably around 106 million. At the 125 million production budget mark, the loss bloats to around 113 million dollars. Huge losses for Blue Beetle. These losses are not out of the ordinary either. Every single DC live-action film that has been released since James Gunn announced that his DC universe would reset the DC film continuity has racked up millions in losses for the company. At the end of January, this is what Gunn declared. It says, first, we have Shazam! Fury of the Gods. Shazam has always been kind of in his own part of the DCU, so he connects very well. That moves directly into the Flash fantastic movie that I really love, that resets the entire DCU universe. And then to move into Blue Beetle, a fantastic film about a kid who is a marvelous part of the DCU, and then into Aquaman 2, which leads directly into our next few projects. I'm not going to go into the rest of everything he announced. Obviously, this is DCU slate. Superman Legacy is the first film in it. There's a bunch of TV films or TV shows that are going to be coming out before it. So looking at those projects that did come out after he made this announcement, Shazam! Fury of the Gods only raked in 132.1 million. The film had an $125 million production budget. That means the film lost around $108 million. That's probably around what we're seeing Blue Beetle. The Flash grossed only $267.9 million at the global box office based off an estimated $200 million production budget, albeit there are credible reports that the production budget was much higher, with CBC, that's the Canadian Broadcasting Company, reporting the film cost $220 million. There are rumors the film cost around $300 million as well, or even higher than that, due to all the reshoots, the delays, and everything like that. Looking at the most charitable production budget of $200 million, the movie lost around $139 million. At the $220 million production mark, it lost around $169 million. And then if you go up to that $300 million mark, if those rumors are true, it lost around $289 million. So huge losses for The Flash, even bigger than Blue Beetle and Shazam! Fury of the Gods, despite it having a higher actual total box office because the production budget was so much higher. So if you look at the most charitable losses for each of these three films, they total around $329.2 million. I think that's pretty clear that announcing Gunn's DC universe and specifically claiming it would reset the current state of DC continuity in films has lost the company millions of dollars. Absolutely terrible mistake for DC and James Gunn. Whether or not Gunn's Superman Legacy and DC Universe can change the current trajectory is yet to be determined, but it's clear it needs to be wildly successful to recover the massive amounts of money the company burned moving ahead with the reset. I mean, you're burning just $329.2 million, and that's the most charitable outcome using a 2.5 times factor. Interestingly, David Zaslav said this earlier this year at a Moffat-Nathanson's conference. He says, we've greenlit a number of projects, and I think it's one of the assets that was really underutilized underutilized and underdeveloped in this company. And we also have this philosophy at the company of no content before its time. This year, we don't want to put a movie out or a game out unless we think it's our best work. Clearly not. They put out Blue Beetle. They put out The Flash. They put out Shazam! Fury of the Gods. So clearly PR speak going on here. But he then noted, even if we do that, half the time or 2/3 of the time, it's not going to work. But that's the new cultural philosophy of the company. We're a storytelling company. The best creatives fight to make our content the best it could be. So he's actually positing that half the time or even 2/3 of the time, they might end up losing money on their projects. Interesting way to look at a business. I would assume then if you are going to hit it, you better hit it out of the park hard and make a ton of money to make up for all the losses that you're incurring on all of the other films. I just don't think that's how you really run a company. It's interesting that he's saying this. I don't know if he's pandering or whatever, because he actually seems to be the only CEO in Hollywood that has his kind of head on his shoulders, where he's actually cutting the costs, getting cash flow going, doing things that a CEO seemingly should be doing. He's doing everything that Bob Iger is now seemingly trying to do with the Walt Disney Company, even though he's almost like a year behind. Zaslav had already kind of seen where the current trend was going, the trajectory was going with Hollywood and everything like that. So really interesting for him to kind of make these comments. He does kind of make these off the wall comments sometimes about the movie business and stuff like that. And I guess kind of take it with a grain of salt, given the fact he's I feel like more of a CEO type guy rather than actually one of the on the boots creatives kind of things. But it's interesting that he's signaling that he's open to failing 2/3 of the time. That is pretty wild. But right now they're batting 100%, right? They're failing every single time. We'll see if, again, like I said, we'll see if that changes with Superman Legacy. But before we even get to that, we have Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. It's unclear whether or not it will break the trend or continue it. My guess is that it's going to continue the trend. It's going to be nowhere near as much box office as the first Aquaman. I just think that them saying it resets the DC universe has completely railroaded all of these movies, and this probably is going to be up there with The Flash, given the fact that it just has a much higher production budget as well. And I just don't think it's going to be able to make as much money as The Flash did. It might make around the same money as The Flash did, but again, depending on the production budget, it's probably still going to end up losing them lots of money. And then the real test, obviously, though, is whether or not Zaslav's gamble on Gunn pays off, and whether or not, and how well Superman Legacy does at the box office. But what do you make of Blue Beetle finally just kind of getting to its production budget in its 6th weekend? Absolutely abysmal performance at the box office. And I do think it largely has to do with James Gunn announcing the reset all the way back in January, signaling to moviegoers that you don't really need to go see any of these movies because they aren't part of my new vision.
Subscribe for more.